Hello, everybody, and welcome to another My Music. Now, this one took a little bit of jiggery pokery to make it happen because I'm speaking today to the wonderful Fran Ashcroft, and Fran doesn't really do technology, so we're quite amazed. Actually, we've managed to make all of this happen on quite old tech, which is great. And maybe we'll talk about sort of old tech and new tech and why we shouldn't be using it. Straight after this. Well, there you go. You see, now I spoke too soon because what happened was I did the video, and Fran disappeared. Simple as that. I'm going to see if I can get Fran back. Hopefully we can, because, you know, Fran's such an interesting character, and I want to speak to him about his new album, which is absolutely amazing. In fact, maybe I'll tell you a little bit about that while we're waiting. I'm just contacting him by the power of email while we speak. So yeah, I was asked to have a listen to Fran's album, and some of you probably know Fran more from his production work than other things. But yeah, Fran has got a fantastic new album out at the moment, and oh, look, I'm seeing if I can get him back. And there's a single on it as well, Waiting for the Britpop Revival, which is something we're all waiting for. The Songs That Never Were album is really like a trip down memory lane, but in a very new way, of all of your favourite records that you could possibly ever think of. And the production on the album, as you will probably remember from the old Not the 9 O'Clock News sketch, is fantastic. You know, remember sort of the Johnny Mathis thing that Gerald the Gorilla said. And so anyway, hopefully I won't just be talking to myself for very long. Hopefully we will get Fran back. Let's see what happens. Here he is. Look at this. Here comes Fran. Right as we speak. It's going to maybe take a minute or two to get him back. This is kind of modern life. Here we are. There we go.
Ah, wonderful.
There we go. Managed to get you back. I managed to waffle in the interim, which was
I heard the waffle. Wonderful. That was very good.
Thank you very much indeed. Tell me about this album, sir. When I listened to it, I really felt that you kind of rifled through a lot of my favourite albums. You'd kind of picked sort of songs that I liked, rewrote them, and then in terms of the production, you seem to go here, there, and everywhere in terms of trying to hide things that ordinarily should be bright, and then dull things that should be bright, and then make bright things that shouldn't normally be heard. We're just where were you coming from?
Well, it was a strange album because it's basically this collaboration between me from 50 years ago. So
right, yeah.
There are a lot of, about half the album is songs that were made a very long time ago, originally from going as far back as 1972. So it may mirror some of the things you heard in that kind of era. But I wasn't actually doing that at the time. It's a weird one. I used AI so I could separate what were mono recordings, very primitive, everybody playing at once, that kind of thing. Some of the songs, well, most of them were kind of rewritten. Typically, I would take off the original vocal and replace it with a new melody and new lyrics, stuff like that, and maybe add a couple of things or take away a couple of things. So there's this kind of combination of things that are very recent that's happened to these songs and things that have stayed exactly as they were. I deliberately left all the background noise and tape hiss and you name it in all the recordings, rather than clean them up. I think I felt if you started cleaning things up, all the character would be gone and the whole thing would be pointless.
Yeah.
So we have a range of different sounds, and I think it's a surprise every time, really, as you listen to it, as to what era that might have been from. But it's not exactly like it was at the time, because some things have changed, and yet some have changed the same.
Do you know what I mean by the fact that, like, some of the elements are really bright and then some are really dull, but actually, was it a deliberate process or was it literally what you could actually extract from it that made it that that doesn't necessarily go bright where you think it would go bright if someone was like remastering something these days?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because that's what, like, a lot, we're used to like remastering now, aren't we? So we're used to like someone taking something old and making it seem like it's, you know, being made just now. But this isn't like that.
No, I left the stuff that was old exactly as it was.
Yeah.
I might have put new stuff on top of it, which obviously sounds different. So you have this combination of odd stuff going on, and then there's some new tracks that have got old stuff in there as the basic thing.
It's brilliant.
So it is this sort of very weird sort of, as I say, collaboration between these different eras.
Do you think anybody's going to pick this album up in like 30 years from now and remaster it and try and make it all bright? And would you
I wouldn't let anybody do that.
Well, great. I was going to say, would you get quite angry about that? Because
yeah. I mean, the record is exactly what it should be like.
Yeah.
And it was kind of new territory, and in some ways I knew exactly what I would end up with, and in other ways there were one or two things that I think, well, could I get away with that or not?
Yeah.
And always, if I ask myself, can I get away with that or not, I'll do it to see if I can.
Yeah, I like it. Do you think, as someone that's, you know, known for their production, do you think that actually these days, with technology and being able to clean up things and whatever from the past or whatever, do you think we sometimes spoil stuff by trying to go back over it and try and clean it all up? And
always.
Yeah.
Always. If you remaster stuff, it's never going to be better than the original ones. Particularly if you go into old material where they do a re-release on digital and so on. Records that, for example, would have been originally cut to vinyl. And the whole mastering process in those days was all about how you cut it to vinyl. And some guys were very good at that, and some guys are pretty crap at it. So, you know, there's a lot of bad sounding records from, you know, the ancient periods or quasi-modern periods, because they weren't all good.
Yeah.
But the ones that are good should not be changed.
Yeah.
And when they go over it and sort of remodel it or stereoize it or whatever the hell they do with it, or, you know, stick orchestras that shouldn't be there on stuff.
Yeah.
It's always just to make money from and try and resell what is fundamentally an old product that's, perfect as it is, and just mess around with it to give an excuse to re-release it and get more people to buy it or buy it all over again.
Yeah. Is it, well, that's true. Although, do you feel that there's ever an excuse for it? But it's ultimately, if somebody says that I am actually reinventing this piece,
that's rather different. But
that's different, isn't
all
it?
depends what you mean by reinventing.
Yeah.
Reinventing isn't sticking an
Remastering.
orchestra on, Roy Orbison's records. It's an orchestra that shouldn't be there. They would have put one on in the first place.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time it's inappropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you
There's
make of
one
these?
on an ad at the moment where they took an old song and they've overdubbed some like new sounding drums on top of it to try and make it great to sell the ad with, and it's awful. It's just, they just completely ruined it, and they got this kick drum coming in and all the levels are wrong. It's just awful. I won't name the ad.
No. But it seems a part of it seems to miss part of the rationale for using that song in the first place, I think, which is that surely one of the reasons you use a song, especially an older song, is because it's got a emotive connection to a point in time. And if you then completely change it away from what it actually was, you're distorting the memory. So therefore, people don't actually resonate with it in the same way in the way you probably
not at
want
all. They make a mistake when they think that, oh well, if we shove some electronic drums on it, we can get a new audience. They're completely wrong.
Yeah,
because they underestimate what a new audience is and what it wants.
Yeah. And I know that from talking to lots of young artists that have come through and talked to me on here, which is that, they absolutely love older records. They love older music, the way it was. And, a lot of them will be like, oh, if only I could actually get it to sound like that at that time,
I mean, good records, the ones that have been around a long time and the ones that you still hear, we still hear them because they're good. And what they sound like doesn't matter. There's a mistake when people talk about fidelity, for example, about, oh, well, it has to sound like this and you have to have this particular device on it because that's what everybody's using to make it sound current and make it sound good. So the definition of what is a good sound, it's a relative thing. It's not to do with whether the sonics are, wider or the smaller, or it's stereo or it's mono. It's what's appropriate to a record that's important.
Yeah. Who's out there at the moment that's making music? Who do you think is good at being sensitive to what's needed in terms of authenticity of sound?
I think the problem is with all the mainstream records, i.e. major label stuff, it's become so corporatized that records are sort of made by committee. So they'll have a team of songwriters building a song that's just like this or just like that, right into order. I mean, I could do that if I wanted. In fact, I used to do that, or I get asked to do that. And if you know how to write, you can knock them out like that, but they don't mean anything and they don't resonate with anybody. They're sort of a pointless exercise. Anything that's actually interesting is always coming from, well, not exactly, I wouldn't say the street, but independently made records. And the ones that become popular independently, those artists are picked up by majors and then remodeled to make them accessible to a wide audience, and they ruin them in the process. And that's what major record companies have done for a very long time.
Yeah. Well, I spoke to a young independent artist last night who's really maintained her independence all the way through her career, and she said just how important that was to her, because she felt exactly the same way, that although she's had interest from labels, she just felt that she would lose the ability to actually say what she needed to say in the way that she needed to say it, which is really interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's
absolutely correct, though.
Yeah.
And anybody who goes through this independent through to big major record deal thing, and it doesn't matter who they are, it becomes compromised, because there's all these pressures from the label to do this, to do that, to do the other, blah, 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 blah. And you end up feeling compromised. Whether it be, oh, we need another A side, for next week or whatever, was the usual thing you used to get. And I know this because I've been through it myself. I'm very familiar territory. What is really nice for me now, all these years on, I mean, obviously I've been a producer mainly, but I started off as an artist, as a solo artist or whatever. I remember feeling compromised in 1973, and then it's a decision about, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to take the money, which the money enables you to have the time so you can develop? But of course, you have the time to develop, but they put these pressures on you to develop in a certain way. And so it's the old art versus commerce thing. And there's no real answer to it, other than if you're able to stay independent, stay independent. And the great thing about the modern music business is there are two different tiers of it. So you can actually choose, do you want to be with a major label or do you want to stay independent? And the other reason for staying independent is because if you sign to a major record label, they bloody own you for life these days. It didn't used to be like that, but they do now.
Yeah.
I mean, they own, some of them want to own your actual name.
Well, absolutely. We're seeing though and this will probably lead us nicely into talking about your single from this album as well. But we're seeing at the moment a few things happening which are really quite interesting. So one of the things that we're seeing happen is we're seeing independent artists really getting their together when it comes to being able to motivate their fan base into buying. That seems to be really, really strong. I mean, what we've seen in the last few years is quite a few independent artists' albums getting to the #1 slot, and it's been done by literally hitting the streets, opening up pop-up shops, getting people down to gigs, bash, hard graft to get there.
Yeah.
But it's working, and every time it works, what's lovely is we're then seeing like everybody from the community getting behind it and going, right, yeah, we're going to help you get to your album to #1 as well, because kind of we're sick of the industry, really. I think that's kind of what's coming through. So that's happening.
I think it's fantastic, and somebody who's doing that and staying as independent as they possibly can, I would say keep doing it, because if you sign to a major record label, they'll work you even harder and you'll get much less for it.
Don't think it's going to be an easy life. Yeah. But the other thing we're seeing is we are seeing major artists trying to get back their independence and trying to be business savvy about it, because so it shows you that nobody's kind of free from this.
No,
even at the top, Taylor Swift remaking all of her own albums.
Yeah.
Towards the end of last year, Ed Sheeran, the second album that he released of the year, he released it on his own record label. Clearly, it didn't have the push or, you know, whatever that it would have done if it had been released on the label that he signed to. But, you know, and he openly came out and said, well, I don't have any expectations for this. It still went to number one. He's Ed Sheeran. But, you know, what we're seeing is artists trying to take back control, aren't we? In order to...
Yes, and they should, because, you know, it's got out of hand over the years. To make a sort of quick comparison on that, when I was recording with my band back in the late 70s, we go into the studio and basically we were not interfered with, other than the producer choosing the wrong sort of studio for us, perhaps. But from a creative point of view, there weren't really any restrictions, other than all they were interested in was, have you got a single or not? You know, and they go with the one that they thought was a single. There was very little control otherwise. They weren't sort of stepping in every 2 minutes saying, well, you've got to have this done and you've got to come up with that, or we're getting these writers in because they can do a better job than you can. There was none of that. That changed over the years, and it started to change in the 1980s. You know, with like the stock with Aiken Waterman thing, where it became a package and the writers did this and the producers did that, and there you go, bang, bang, another hit single. And from then on, it became more and more and more corporatized. And now we got to a point where you got everything Spotify, that's about it. And if you're an artist or a writer on Spotify, you're getting nothing. You're getting 0.003 pence for a play, as opposed to in the old days, when you got a play on Radio 1, you were getting 40 quid.
Yeah, right.
Each play. How things have changed.
How things have changed. I think it's quite interesting as well. Don't know whether you've been following it at all, but it's quite interesting to see or hear from people like Rick Astley over the last year or so, where he's just written his book and he's been talking. I saw him talking to Justin Hawkins on his podcast the other day. He did an interview with him about just how much he was affected by that whole going along with the stock Aiken Waterman thing, you know, being a you know, part of the machine, if you like. And that, yeah, it was in a one way, it was a great opportunity. And but you know, as someone that was in a band, he did play drums, he did write his own music, he could sing, etc. You know, it kind of stripped his musical identity from him for years, and it took him decades to get that back. So, you know,
I can understand it.
Yeah,
I really understand that. Yeah,
and
I mean, that's how much you can be compromised.
Yeah,
and
I
more,
think
the
it's
more
a
you're
good
being
lesson, isn't it?
compromised, the longer it takes to get over it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's
Talk to me about the single, "Waiting for the Britpop Revival."
The Britpop single. That was a lot of fun. That was the one that I just did it to test out what AI did or what it was capable of. You know, because I had a friend of mine who got the AI software and stuff and said, "Oh, I can separate these tracks and remix this and blah 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 blah." And I thought it was interesting, so I was just checking it out, really. And by coincidence, I had a tune in my head, which was similar to a song I'd written a very long time ago. And I thought, oh, you know, you could just like shove that on top of that one. It'd be great, you know, it'd be much better. So I just did it as a test, and I took the old vocal off and put a new one on with a new tune. And I thought it sounded great, you know.
Yeah.
So right, what else have I got? Hence album.
Well, that song and the title of that song. I mean, how much of that is tongue in cheek? In a way,
It's all tongue in cheek because
yeah.
I miss Britpop entirely. You know, I might have known Damon and all that stuff,
You blinked
but
and it went.
I moved to the States in 1989. And I didn't even get really back to England until around about 97. So Britpop was there and gone by then.
Yeah.
And I thought, shit, I've missed that. That would have been up my street as a producer.
Well, I think a lot of us, even who were around and growing up at the time, and you know, were going to gigs, and I think we half missed it. You know, it was over very quick. It was over a lot more quickly than I think history probably gives it credence for.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think the idea came from me when I thought, well, let's see if I can catch up on Britpop and catch up on the things that I missed, the records I hadn't never heard. So I was hearing Elastica and, you know, the one-hit wonders and all the one-hit wonders I'd never even heard, because you don't get anything like that in America. And I thought, oh, some of that stuff was really good. Some of it, not much, but some of it was really good.
There were a lot of bands that had one song.
A lot of bands that had one song, and the one songs were really good.
Yeah.
And the rest of it sort of really didn't resonate, other than Blur and like Oasis, who I don't really even class as Britpop. You know, they're just a derivative band. That's it. You know.
Yeah.
Didn't mean anything to me. Blur were always just a bit too clever for their own good.
Do you rate, though, Damon Albarn as a producer himself over the years now?
Well, Damon, you know, with Damon, it depends who he's collaborating with.
Right.
He needs a collaborator. And if he's got a really good collaborator, he does really good stuff. And if he's got one that's not that great, then the stuff's not that great.
That's interesting.
But he needs someone to bounce ideas off, because he always had plenty of ideas. It was just, you know, working on his own, could never quite get what he wanted out of them, shall we say?
Yeah,
I'm being kind.
Okay. I think maybe that's why Blur albums appear when they appear, as they do. I mean, it's
I mean, I think they were a good band and a lot of good songs and a lot of, you know, to my mind, very well made stuff. You know, but to a limited audience, really. I mean, for a mainstream British audience or an American audience, you know, it's a bit clever. You know, I mean, I know you sort of went to art school and all that stuff. You know, I understand it because I did. You know, and you've got your own thing. It's like, oh, you put in all your little in jokes and stuff. But that doesn't translate to the wider public, as Oasis did, because that was all straightforward.
Straightforward rock and roll.
You know, very familiar territory.
Yeah,
and therefore more commercial.
Is there anyone over the years, maybe, you know, as an artist, but or maybe as a producer, that you feel sort of just missed out, or we missed out on them, but actually they, you know, we should go back and listen to them?
Oh, there are so many. There are so many who, you know, maybe they had one hit or something that got in the middle part of the top 30 and then just sort of gradually disappeared. Or indeed some old albums that resurfaced later on and become popular, particularly on vinyl. There's so many, you know, I'm not sure I could pick one. But there are loads. There are loads of almost dead. XTC is a very good example in a sense. You know, they had a few decent hits. And then it was fundamentally disagreements with the record label and what they wanted them to do. So they got saddled with inappropriate producers, or they wouldn't let them even release their psychedelic album initially, did they? The one that was very popular with Van, that they put out under a different name.
Yeah.
And then they got tied up in legal wranglings for 30 years.
That happens as well.
Yeah. I mean, when they had one album that went gold in America, and at the time, the drummer had a part-time job as a milkman because he couldn't survive off what they were earning.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Disgraceful.
Yeah.
Disgraceful.
Absolutely disgraceful.
They're a very, very good band.
And I think people know
if
that.
They were left to their own devices.
Yeah, and I think people know that because, but it's funny, isn't it? Because the way that people find music is there's a group of people out there that actually explore music, and they find the gems because they're bothered to look, and then there's a group of people that just literally let music pass by them, and they're like that because it's going past them at the time, a bit like the generation game escalator thing. It's like, oh yeah, cuddly toy, food blender. Yeah, well, I'll take this band at the time, right? But they don't see anything outside of that really, because they can't be bothered to look.
Yeah.
But when bands are special by doing things like this, because I spoke to I did an interview with Colin Moulding.
Right.
It's the most viewed interview out of anything on YouTube, and the comments and the love for Colin and his bass playing and his songwriting and whatever just pours in from those that are in the know.
Yeah, and I think it's like that. Music enthusiasts, they're very good at spreading the word really about the things that they like or the things that they love, and it's those music enthusiasts that are really responsible for the resurgence and popularity of vinyl at the minute, which obviously the major labels hopped on and took all the pressing plants over so that the independents couldn't get a look at anymore, and they took it away from them and sort of started bunging out Fleetwood Mac albums, in 5 million quantities.
Yeah.
But it's the music enthusiasts at really grassroots level, the ones that dig out all these gems, that are responsible for that entirely.
I wouldn't be surprised though if we saw a new pressing plant open in Manchester last year, I think it was.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see collectives of music enthusiasts actually start to put money in and create.
Well, I mean, there are a number of independent labels who say just do vinyl or whatever. The problem at the moment is because the majors have took all the capacity, all the manufacturing capacity. I mean, a friend of mine who I've mastered most of his vinyl through the years, he used to have a turnaround time of a maximum of 2 months. So he was able to schedule all his releases in advance and make sense of what he was going to do for an entire year very easily. Now, he's lucky if it's 8 months, and, this last year, it got to 12 months.
Yeah.
And, you can't run a label if you got to look a year ahead, because, when you're in the vinyl business, fundamentally you pay up front.
Yeah.
So, the economics don't add up anymore. and he's been limited now into doing like CD compilations in the meantime until things perhaps settle down and the majors aren't interested in vinyl anymore.
Yeah, and also because you're ending up asking artists to promote the material that they wrote 2 years ago, which, you know.
Well, yeah. So it all becomes out of step at that point.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so sorry, we're on this album now.
Yeah, and you've got music fans who, you know, they'll wait a while for a new release from this artist they like. If they got to wait 2 years for it, so maybe they've found somebody else as well to be going on with, you know.
Yeah. Well, there you are. Something to campaign for. We need more philanthropists out there to put some money into record plants, but then only allow independent artists to use it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the other problem, strictly from a vinyl point of view in this country, is that we got rid of all our pressing plants. So up until that one in Manchester opened or wherever it was, we didn't have any.
Yeah.
Well, we might have had one that did short runs. So if you wanted vinyl, it was coming from Europe.
Yeah.
Since Brexit, you know, the cost of importing it and the duty and all the rest of it is astronomical. So the price that a small label can charge for a vinyl album has gone up so much that it becomes unaffordable.
Yeah.
So they've kind of wrecked it for them, really, the majors.
Well, let's hope something changes that. That would be good.
It always does. It just seems to take a hell of a long time.
Yeah, it's a little bit like I can't remember what the name of the campaign is now, but there's a campaign out to get the larger venues to put money back into the smaller venues because we're losing too many small venues, which is the you know, the sort of growth ground for any artist, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a really big problem, and that's, I think, due to, you know, when COVID came along, a lot of those venues couldn't sustain themselves anymore because they ran out of money.
Yeah.
So they closed down, and there's a lot of things that closed down that can't afford to reopen. You know, and wherever people were going, you know, they went to this gig or that gig in this place they've been going to for years, doesn't exist anymore. So now, I don't know, maybe they do something else instead.
Yeah. Well, the argument is that, you know, with the astronomical price that's being charged to go and see certain mainstream acts at larger venues, that if some of that money was tiered down into the smaller venues, then it would work. And it's needed because, you know, nobody gets up on stage in front of 100,000 people having not learnt their craft. Nobody, you know, and that's the whole argument. If you lose these smaller venues, where do these people play to become the people that you go to see at a large venue? You eventually lose that as well. So
absolutely, you know, I mean, it was bad enough when bands were reduced having to play in pubs. I thought that was pretty bad.
Yeah, especially when people still smoked in pubs. As I was discussing with Nick Hudson the other day on here, because where he lives now, people do still smoke in pubs, and he said, "Oh, I can't." We had to move his interview once because he couldn't speak because he'd been playing in a pub. But yeah, you know, I used to suffer terribly after playing like 6 pubs in a row. You as a vocalist, your voice is like, because you just inhaled everybody's cigarettes for the last.
Well, mine used to give out at the end every night. I'll say that.
Yeah, there you go. You know, and then they brought in the, you know, sort of Clean Air Act, and it was all okay. Are you hoping, as part of this album as it goes out, and because you are obviously sort of, you know, tracing back into the past as well with some of the music. Are you hoping people will use it as a bit of a stepping ground as well to go and investigate the original material as well? And
that never occurred to me at all. You know, I just
you were having so much fun.
Well, yeah, I just saw this album for what it is, you know. And I didn't sort of relate it to anything outside, or will it do this or will it do that. I just wanted to make the record, you know, as it is.
Yeah, although it may do that, as a matter of fact, it might
be interesting.
Yeah,
it could be interesting. I mean, I didn't know what anyone would make of this thing. You know, I mean, the first time when I assembled the final running order and I listened to it back the first time, it's like I couldn't make head or tail of it. I thought, you know, and it was like a surprise every time, even though I, you know, knew that the songs. When I heard them in sequence with each other, it was like, oh, that happened then, did it? Oh, right. You know, it surprised me. So, in terms of sort of classifying what it is, I still think that's really difficult for me to do. I don't know.
Cool.
You know, I know it spans this kind of period of time, over a long period of time. But exactly what it is, or whether things that are from 50 years ago still resonate, perhaps they resonate in a different way. I hope that they resonate in some kind of way. It's probably the closest thing I can put to it.
Yeah. Well, for anyone listening, if you prefer your music to be like an exotic box of chocolates with tastes where you don't really know what it's going to be like until you bite in to each one, as opposed to the you know, faceless tub of stuff that you chomp on at Christmas, this is the album for you.
Yeah, I think that's a very good analogy.
Thank you.
Just watch out for the marzipan.
Yes, we won't tell you where it is. Won't tell you which track it is, but you know, it's in there, and it may even have a slightly aniseedy taste to it as well. Aniseedy marzipan. Fran, I'm glad we finally got there. We actually managed to achieve this with, I'm going to say, Windows 7 technology, which is
that's right, and my complete lack of it.
Absolute.
This is a man who doesn't have a mobile phone. You know,
yeah.
This is where we're talking.
Absolutely. There. Well, that's one thing you and Damon Albarn have got in common, because he doesn't like a mobile phone either. So, you know, although
I bet he owns one.
Well, he could. Yes, apparently he does, but apparently his daughter has hold of it.
Oh well, that's a good strategy,
isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
It gives the responsibility to somebody else. There you go, collaborating even to the last. But it's been a pleasure to see you. Pleasure to talk music with you. And you know, please, folks, if you've been listening to Fran and you've enjoyed the conversation, now go and check out the album. We'll put some links to that as this goes out, and you can go and fill your boots and enjoy. Please do go and buy it as well if you've got money, because that's a really good thing to do. Until next time, thanks for watching. Bye for now.
Thank you very much, Graham.